Last year, I was on an episode of the House of Pod podcast. That podcast is hosted by Dr. Kaveh Hoda, a good friend of mine and a gastroenterologist. The other person on the show was Robert Evans of the Behind the Bastards podcast. The three of us came together to discuss a person that kind of fell in the middle of our respective Venn diagrams of interest. Lucy Letby, the British nurse who was convicted of murdering 7 babies in a neonatal unit and trying to murder many more over the course of just 1 year. In the show, Kaveh described the horrific details of the case while Robert and I sat there disgusted and occasionally making really, really dark jokes. Vanta Black jokes. Seriously, listen at your own risk. If you didn't hear that episode, though, let me just give you a basic rundown of what Letby was convicted of doing. In 2015, she began working with the babies in the neonatal intensive care unit of Countess of Chester Hospital, where they typically saw 2 to 3 deaths per year. Shortly after she joined, though, 4 infants crashed and 3 died in a single month. All of them had been under Letby's care, all had been expected to survive, and all of the deaths were ruled as unexplained, which, to be fair, is quite common when it comes to infant deaths. Over the following year, several more unexplained deaths occurred during Letby's shifts, and eventually some staff members thought it more than coincidental, so they asked that she be investigated. An internal investigation insisted that it was just a coincidence. Despite that, in April of 2016, Letby was moved to a shift at a different time of day, and the timing of the deaths seemed to shift with her. As deaths continued to happen above and beyond what was to be expected, eventually the police stepped in to investigate. They found that in addition to the coincidence of Letby being present for so many suspicious deaths, Letby had also falsified some documents to make it appear as though she wasn't on shift when she was, which she said was just a simple mistake of paperwork, but also that she had taken home many confidential documents related to the babies. She had repeatedly searched Facebook for the victims' families, especially on holidays and birthdays, that she had handwritten in her diary and on Post-it notes fragments like, "I am evil, I did this," and that her diary also contained the initials of the dead babies along with the dates that they were born, that she attacked them, and that they died. And also at least one consultant said he walked in on Letby standing over a baby who was crashing and she just wasn't doing anything at all. Autopsies of the dead babies revealed evidence that some had been injected with air into their stomachs and or their bloodstream to cause embolism, and tests indicated that others were unnecessarily injected with insulin. Letby was tried in October 2022, and late last year she was convicted 7 counts of murder and 8 counts of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison. Pretty cut and dry, right? Letby would hardly be the first angel of death masquerading as a medical professional, killing unwitting patients out of a need for attention or sympathy or just because they're sociopaths who love killing. I honestly did not second guess the evidence or the resulting verdict. But back in May, I saw this New Yorker article suggesting that maybe Letby was, in fact, innocent. It's very long. There's a lot of inches devoted to discussing how delicate and nice and sweet Lucy Letby is. So at the time, I just kind of skimmed it, dismissed it as cherry picking, and forgot about it. But following Letby's guilty verdict in a retrial a few weeks ago, The Guardian published a similar piece with a bit more detail and a bit less sad white ladies don't kill anyone, do they? So this got my attention and I decided to finally read that and then go back and read the New Yorker piece. And I found a few points to be quite salient. First, there's the argument about Letby's confession in her diary. She wrote things like, "I am evil, I did this." But that could be the product of someone having a complete mental breakdown due to the investigation she was under. Nurses are under a lot of pressure even when they're not being accused of murder. And as someone who also journals, I do get how it might be cathartic to write down the things that you are accused of and to maybe even believe them, even if it's not true. Statements like, I killed them on purpose because I am not good enough, could actually be read two ways as well. Did she murder the babies because she felt that she wasn't good enough to take care of them? Or did they die for other reasons for which she blames herself, which would make it on purpose to her? People journal in different ways. Thoughts can be expressed in ways that might be confusing to outsiders because they're not written down for outsiders. So I kind of get that argument. Both articles also point out that often left out of discussions on Letby is that the neonatal unit that she worked for was understaffed, underfunded, and full of quality control issues. She was hired at the worst of their problems, and they stopped accepting critically ill babies after she was fired, which is why, you could explain deaths went down after she left. The understaffing meant that she was one of only 2 qualified junior nurses in her unit, so of course she would be present for many of the deaths. That brings us to the statistics, which seem to be the most important evidence that led to Letby's conviction. First of all, the prosecution ignored several equally unexplained deaths or deaths possibly attributable to insulin injection that Letby could not have possibly been around for. This unnaturally strengthened the statistical anomaly of Letby being present at the other deaths. When you see that there are these other suspicious deaths that she wasn't around for, it looks less like a concerning pattern. Also, some statisticians point out that it's way more possible than you think for any nurse to coincidentally be on call during a sudden uptick in deaths. Mathematician Richard Gill at Leiden University in the Netherlands has been vocal online about how much Letby's case resembles that of another Lucy de Burke, who he helped exonerate in 2010 after she was convicted of murdering or attempting to murder 7 patients under her care by injecting them with drugs or increasing their medication. Her conviction was also based on the improbability of her being present when so many healthy patients crashed under mysterious circumstances. But after she spent 7 years in prison, she was finally exonerated, and her case is now considered one of the worst miscarriages of justice in the history of the Netherlands. Finally, some experts argue that there is no actual solid evidence that any of the babies had actually been injected with air or insulin. 2 babies were supposedly injected with insulin, but they survived. But the test used to detect the insulin was not the appropriate test to use for that purpose. The more accurate tests that should have been done were never performed. However, the defense completely failed to bring that up when challenging the results. They didn't challenge the results at all, even though many scientists now say that those tests were not correct and could have thrown some false positives. The jury was told that if they found Letby guilty of those 2 attempted murders, supposedly with insulin, they could use that as evidence that could weight how they found on those other murder charges, in which Letby was said to have injected air into the babies. For the deaths by injection of air, the prosecution's expert witness testified that there was a telltale discoloration on the baby's skin, which was shown in a study on this very rare phenomenon back in 1989. But the sole remaining living author on that paper later looked at the baby's skin and said that none of those discolorations matched the findings from his paper. He was not called by the defense to testify, and when he offered to testify in the appeal, the judge said that the defense should have considered that in the first trial and then denied the appeal, which, from an American's perspective, that seems a little unfair because here you can appeal the results of your first trial based purely on the fact that your representation sucked. But I guess that's just not a thing in the UK. For additional and more specific criticism of all of the science used in that trial, the mathematician, Gill, and the New Yorker both cite Sarita Adams, a scientific consultant in California, who launched Science on Trial late last year to work towards a more equitable legal system by offering better scientific consultancy to lawyers. That sent me to an article written on that site, presumably written by Adams, that delves into the deeper problems with those insulin tests. Adams makes a very technical argument that as a layperson, I'd have to rely upon her expertise. I cannot understand this. So I decided to poke around her website to see what her credentials were. And friends, that's when the rabbit hole begins. So before I continue, let me just summarize what I had learned thus far. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence against Letby, including her possibly falsifying 2 records, taking home a bunch of private documents, being present during many deaths, and being seen by a pediatrician standing over a baby who was crashing and doing nothing. On the other hand, the hard evidence is lacking, including post-mortem exams that found no malicious wrongdoing, problematic tests for the insulin and air embolism that may have thrown false positives, diary confessions that appear alongside similar statements of innocence that may be explained by distress, and the cherry picking of data that exaggerates the statistical impossibility of her being present at so many deaths. At this point, my own opinion was that the counter evidence does not prove that Letby is innocent, but it does make a compelling case that maybe she deserves a retrial because the proof of guilt no longer reaches beyond reasonable doubt. I'm including a lot of weasel words here because I am not a lawyer, nor am I a doctor, nor am I a statistician, and so I could very well be wrong. I know, it's so unfun when I can't just take a solid, problematic stance on something. I can feel the algorithm abandoning me as I speak. And so, just to be clear, before I go on, that is still my opinion now. Is Lucy Letby guilty? I think she probably is, but I don't know. Did she get a fair trial? I think she probably didn't, but I don't know. All right? Back to Sarita Adams and Science on Trial, which weren't just cited by The New Yorker and often championed by Gill, but they were also mentioned glowingly in a lot of the articles I saw about this pushback to the Letby prosecution. I couldn't find Sarita Adams' credentials on her website, so I Googled her, which is pretty easy. She has a unique name. The top result is her LinkedIn, which just says she did a PhD at Cambridge and is a visiting scholar at the UC Davis Mind Institute, which provides comprehensive evidence-based assessments and intervention recommendations for children with possible neurodevelopmental conditions at our Massey Family Clinic. So that wasn't super helpful. I don't know if she, what her PhD is in, what she does. So I decided to check out the second result. A subreddit dedicated to investigating and criticizing Sarita Adams' claims and Science on Trial. Google's preview was very enticing, but sadly the subreddit was set to private, and I was unable to get in even after messaging the moderators asking for permission. Luckily, the Wayback Machine exists, and the post there claimed that Adams admitted she does not have a PhD. The images were missing, so I tried to find the website that they mentioned they found on archive.org, but I got the message that rexvlucyletby2023.com has been excluded from the Wayback Machine, a message I have actually never encountered before. The site that is currently live at that address is branded Science on Trial and reads, "This website, along with all the scientific detail it contains, has been produced and compiled by a scientist with expertise in rare pediatric diseases. We have now limited access to the material on this website to prevent ongoing copyright violations." That's weird. Further down the Google results, I got some more information from Reason Magazine, which wrote about a legal battle between Sarita Adams and the Redditors criticizing her. According to Reason, Adams filed a restraining order against the subreddit moderator, telling the courts that the mod and users of the subreddit were stalking and harassing her and that their comments are defamatory, which led a judge to grant an injunction demanding that the Redditors remove all their online criticism. You guys know by now that using the court system to silence critics is a big red flag to me, by which I mean it's usually a shitty thing that quacks do because they're unable to mount an adequate defense of their quackery. Is that what's happening here? Tough to say. I have run into this before and been shown that the quacks in question actually had a good point, so I tried to keep an open mind. I kept digging, and I was surprised to learn that not only did Adams start Science on Trial to defend Letby late last year, but she also apparently around the same time launched a fundraiser to fund the appeal process for Letby, according to media reports. which is weird because Adams is a concerned scientist in California with no formal connection to Letby or her case. And according to MSN, who describes Adams as a scientific consultant for biotech startups, she started raising money supposedly to fund the appeal in British courts. But after a lot of digging, I couldn't find any evidence that the fundraiser exists, or how much it raised, if it does exist, or whether or not any of that money was actually given to Letby or her legal counsel. But I did find several other court cases Sarita Adams has apparently been involved in. There was a divorce that didn't seem relevant, so I didn't read those papers. And in 2021, she was part of a group of defendants in a breach of contract case that was eventually dismissed for her. And it seems as though she is currently being sued by American Express for failure to pay $26,000. Next, I found a Facebook group that is dedicated to discussing the Letby case, and they noticed when Adams' fundraiser was launched last year. They were intrigued by the Science on Trial website, stating that the group had, quote, retained the barrister Mark McDonald to act as counsel for the application to intervene in the Letby appeal. McDonald is the founder of the Innocence Project London, and when the Facebook users contacted him, he apparently replied that he had had conversations with Science on Trial, but was not representing them or Letby in any appeal, any intervention, and he had no plans to. A few days after the Facebook post, the reference to McDonald was deleted from the Science on Trial website. They also posted a screenshot apparently showing Adams saying that she had thus far raised over £3,000, or just under $4,000. Finally, they pointed out this incredible exchange in the comments of that Reason article. So first, a user called Shiny Happy People, who has a suspiciously large amount of knowledge and a lot of anger about defending Adams, writes that the Reddit moderator in question is a vicious stalker of a mixed-race autistic woman who was a victim of domestic abuse. In reply, a lawyer decided to look up Adams' public divorce documents and found this. While both parties accused the other of domestic violence, the trial court found Billings' testimony more credible based on pictures showing Dr. Adams painting on the walls, "I hate you," damaging Billings' property, causing injuries to Billings' body, and kneeling on the floor with a can of gasoline and 2 knives, which presented a disturbing picture. The court did not credit Dr. Adams' insistence that Billings was gaslighting her or that she was the abused party. The court stated it was not convinced by Dr. Adams' explanations as to how she obtained her injuries and expressed its opinion that Dr. Adams was the primary aggressor. Guys, this is the point where I finally stopped and just reevaluated my life choices. I was so deep in that I was learning things I never wanted to know about the contentious divorce of a woman I had never even heard of last week. And this is the thing. Sarita Adams and her now disappeared fundraising absolutely set off my grift detector. But at the same time, while digging through all these Facebook groups and subreddits and Twitter accounts and blog comments, I can see how she probably feels like she's being harassed. Because on the other side are a bunch of people who are, right or wrong, obsessed with the people who are obsessed with Lucy Letby's presumed innocence. When I first started exploring all this, I was trying to gauge how people reacted to the New Yorker and Guardian articles on social media. And it was like I was trying to read Esperanto. Several days of obsessive research later, I now know that the mathematician Richard Gill, who has also been retweeting pseudoscientific body language examinations that claim they can tell the doctors in the Letby case are lying, also posted on Twitter that essentially if some of Letby's murders were to ease the suffering of the babies, then that's okay. And someone else found a Facebook comment where he said he felt like going to the courthouse with an AK-47, and all of that was posted by a user called Go and Have a Wash Lulu, so named because it's actually an anonymous parody account to mock another user named Sarah Lou, who is a true crime fan who posts about how she thinks Letby is not guilty. In other words, this case of a woman accused of serial killing babies has become an intercontinental troll meme fight with lore so deep that the average normie can only throw their hands in the air and hope the jury made the right decision. The pushback against the Letby conviction reminds me a lot of the lab leak hypothesis for the origins of COVID, which I most recently discussed last month. It starts with real scientists raising valid concerns about an issue and engaging in a good faith scientific back and forth. And then as time goes on and lay people get involved, it actively morphs into a conspiracy theory where proponents dig in and make their position their entire personality. And that's really problematic because while you can debate a scientific position, like the evolution of a virus or the signs of a rare embolism, you can't debate who you are as a person. Nobody wants to do that. So I guess the moral of this story is, please try to be normal. Base your personality on something good for your mental health, like gardening or swimming or making YouTube videos about not normal people. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.